Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, January 16th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to do all of the national title talk today. We're going to get to every single bit of this game and officially give my pick in the third segment. We'll get to a little bit of a fallout in the last segment, get a couple of hot takes in the last segment of the day, but a couple of inflection points, a couple of unsung players, and just talk about maybe this is the best shot that these two teams have. We'll talk about that in the first two segments. So all national title talk. I promise we will get to the Quinn Ewers talk. I do think he made the right decision, just to give you a little bit of a preview, but we'll talk about that in more detail. I'll give you reasons why I think he made the right decision and why I think his legacy is just not what it should be. But we'll get to that in time. That is something we'll deal with tomorrow. But before we jump into today's show, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use the super chat at the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page. You can click that $, add any question, comment you like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that and you can ask any questions you got about the national title, because we got a lot of national title talk to get to. I promise we will get into the Quinn Ewers stuff, but definitely wanted to get into all this national title stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the unsung heroes and inflection points for this national title. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to look at this national title. There's a lot of different things that will impact this national title, but whenever you look back at a couple of national titles, or really just big games in college football in general, there are a couple of little things that might seem unnoticeable, might seem imperceptible at different times of the game, but do make a huge difference in the result. And then you have a couple of players that you might not necessarily be circling on the stat sheet before the game, and then you look after the game and they've made a couple of huge plays. It might not show up, incredibly on the stat sheet, but it absolutely is something where they've made some big time plays in that game and have put themselves in position to win that game. So starting with the inflection points, interior offensive line play is going to be massive in this game. When you talk about both these teams, although Ohio State has a little bit more in their bag in terms of offense than Notre Dame does, at least in the pass game, both these teams love to build everything they do off that inside run, whether it's inside zone, whether it's duo, whether it's power, whatever that looks like. They love to find a way to run in between the tackles and then play off of that. So that means, playing a read option like Riley Leonard loves to do. That means, doing an RPO and getting a tight end out in the flat, or getting a Emeka Egbuka out in the flat like Ohio State loves to do. There's so many different ways that you can play around with stuff, but you got to get that interior run set. So for Notre Dame, Rocco Spindler is going to play in this game, probably unlikely to be 100%. So that's the big time question there. Will that guy be fully ready to go, and how much push can he get early? And then maybe will they have to make a change? Because then it would probably be Charles Jagusa, who looks like he's going to start at left tackle. It sounds like he would kick into that Rocco Spindler spot, and then you would have Tosh Baker outside. So it would be a lot of moving parts in the middle of the game. Definitely don't want that to happen, but definitely something to think about. And then Ohio State, since the injury of Seth McLaughlin, it's not necessarily that they've been bad on the interior. They've been plenty good, and they've been able to get enough push, but it definitely has impacted them. You saw Texas get pretty considerable push on the interior of that defensive line. There's just really, really big guys for Texas, and it's the exact same for Notre Dame. Now, you won't have to deal with Riley Mills, which is very, very nice, obviously, probably the best interior player on this football team, but you still will have to deal with Howard Cross and Donovan Hinish and a lot of these other guys that are going to make plays. I can absolutely promise you that. So, interior offensive line play, if you can get push on those interior runs early, if you can get push on, that inside zone on 1st and 10 on the very first play of the game, you might be rolling downhill. Both these offenses in a lot of ways, because the stuff that Notre Dame builds off that singular run in their run game is remarkable. The way Ohio State uses that in their pass game is just downright unstoppable. So the interior O-line play, a couple of injuries there that affected these teams, but you got to step up big in the biggest moment if they're going to want to win this one. Then the middle eight, and this is a very interesting thing to talk about, and it's something that you've heard a lot around the college football space and the football space in general, but both teams have won these in their CFP games, pretty much no doubt about it. Ohio State's a little different because they were up so much in the first two games that sometimes the other team got a couple of scores towards halftime, but Notre Dame has dominated this in a lot of different ways. They scored, obviously, the 17 points in about 45 seconds against UGA to take that lead and totally take over that game, and then the 10 points against Penn State were the turning point of that game. You go down, you get 3 points with Steve Angeli, and then you come down in the second half, score a quick touchdown, tie that game, and everything changes in that game, and Penn State kind of loses a little bit of the grip they had on that game, and then you're looking up and Notre Dame's up at the end of it. So it was a remarkable job by Notre Dame the entire time. For Ohio State, they obviously were able to get that TreVeyon Henderson play at the end of it. Obviously one that I don't expect to happen in this one. I don't expect TreVeyon Henderson to take a screen to the house in this one, but at the end of the day, they've made some big time plays. There's no doubt about that. And I think when you look at a lot of the different things that have happened, especially that TreVeyon Henderson play, you take that out. Let's just say he falls down at the 20-yard line. Let's say he does a little bit of a Will Howard impression and trips a little bit before the goal line. Then Texas doesn't have to do that fourth down that Jack Sawyer scoops and scores on. They kick a field goal. They're up 3 with about 2 minutes left. Very different game, obviously. So these teams, middle eight, have defined how they've gotten here, and it's definitely something they're going to need in this game. Notre Dame's been downright incredible at it, so if I was Ryan Day, I'd probably take the ball out of halftime. I would probably not let them get the ball out of halftime, so I would almost definitely try to make sure that they are not being able to take advantage of this middle eight the way that Notre Dame has really the entire year. And then finally, special teams. There's always going to be an inflection point in these types of big games, and neither of these teams are necessarily hanging their hat on their kicking game. Now, Mitch Jeter has been much better of late, has made some big-time kicks, especially that one against Penn State to send them here, and then Jaden Fielding has been not very consistent, has been a little bit all over the place, has made some big kicks, started the CFP really well with, I believe, 3 made kicks against Tennessee, and then took a little bit of a step back, missed one against Oregon, didn't take a kick against Texas, so a lot of different things to think about with this one. Now, the other part of that is they have electric returners. You have Jaden Harrison on one side that took one back to the house against Georgia. You have, obviously, Caleb Downs returning punts for Ohio State that has taken one back to the house. So these are the margins, field position, kick and punt returns, coverage on those things, and then big time kicks at the end of the game. Those are all things that are not all things, but a couple of things that Ohio State and Notre Dame have really struggled with. Someone's going to have to show up. Someone's going to have to break that trend and really take over this game in that part of the in that third of the game, because that might be where you can really get a big time difference. But those are the inflection points as I see them. Those are the places that I think you might find where the winning team is if you look at those 3 things. But let's move forward to some unsung heroes, and Charles Jagusa has to be one way or the other. He is going to have to play a huge, huge role in this game. Anthony Knapp is not in this game, so makes way for the left tackle that was the left tackle in fall camp to find his way back to that position. Obviously, had that torn ACL in fall camp and was not able to play the entirety of the year. Did come back a little bit and looked pretty good. He played at different moments during during that Penn State game, played some really good football, and he's a guy that is so athletic, can really play some great ball. This is going to be a totally different challenge. He's going to have to play A-plus football. Jack Sawyer, JTT, Kenyatta Jackson is someone that I absolutely love going forward into 2025, but overall, he's going to have elite NFL talent on the other side of him every single snap, and he has to be very, very careful of that. And then Jim Knowles likes to dial up some stuff, so he's going to have to be, I don't want to say perfect, because you don't have to be absolutely perfect, but he's got to be really, really good, because you do have a freshman All-American walking out the door. This was the guy that was starting above him to start the year, and he better show it on Monday, no doubt about that. Then you got Donovan Hinnish, the defensive tackle for Notre Dame. The interior of the Notre Dame defensive line did take a big-time hit with Riley Mills going down. They've played great football since then, no doubt about that. Howard Cross has not been 100%, but has made some great plays. Donovan Hinnish, Gabriel Rubio has been absolutely incredible in kind of that fill-in position for Riley Mills, but Donovan Hinnish is the guy that I think can really be a force. I think he's a guy that is super, super athletic, made a number of plays in that Sugar Bowl against Georgia, was all over the place in that game, and I really do think you could possibly take advantage of this interior somewhat the same way you took advantage of Georgia's. Very, very talented guys on the interior for Ohio State, but Carson Hinsman's still getting relatively used to getting that big-time push, especially against big-time guys, and we saw him struggle at different moments against Texas. Definitely could be a huge thing, and if they win the point of attack, those second-level guys can focus on all the other playmakers for Ohio State, and then you might have a real shot to shut down this offense. Moving over to the Ohio State side of things, G. Scott is becoming one of my favorite players in the entire country throughout the CFP race because he doesn't do anything special. He's not necessarily going to hit you over the head every game. He's not going to have 100 receiving yards in this game. Now that I said it, he's probably going to have 100 receiving yards, but at the end of the day, he made so many big-time plays and so many big-time moments. He is their best blocking tight end, which is so important, the way they run outside zone and a lot of the different concepts they run in that game. And overall, as good as the wide receivers are for Ohio State, they're going to be blanketed at times. There's going to be times where Notre Dame wins that one-on-one battle, or they have the safety over top to help out with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and then G. Scott just has to make that one play. And you saw it against Texas. It was this very play that it probably should have been a 2-yard gain and set up 4th and 6. It ended up being a 6-yard gain and set up 4th and 2, and that was the entire difference of that game. They move on, they score the touchdown where they probably would have kicked the ball, and then it's entirely different of game down the stretch. So huge play by him in that game. I have to imagine he's going to come up with one in this game as well. And then Jordan Hancock is the other guy I want to talk about for Ohio State. This is one of the most underappreciated corners in the entire country. He is absolutely incredible, and he just doesn't start because he's on Ohio State, frankly. He is absolutely remarkable, and you do have Denzel Burke. He did not play much in that second half of that Texas game, kind of nursing a little bit of an injury. Will play in this game, but you do wonder how close to 100% he is and how much Jordan Hancock will rotate into that back end a little bit more often. But him and really all of the cornerbacks are going to be so important when it comes to kind of corralling Riley Leonard. You know, he is going to get outside the tackle at times. He is going to be able to beat the edge to the outside and make a couple of plays. That's where these cornerbacks that are getting blocked on the outside by these wide receivers, they're going to have to come up and make some big-time plays. Jordan Hancock has been really, really good. Very rangy player, can come off blitzes on the edge, and I just have a feeling he's going to make that one big-time play in this game. He's been so good all year. Hasn't got necessarily the press he deserves, but at the end of the day, has made some big-time plays, and I expect him to on Monday. But the national championship is always kind of a weird game. It's always a game that has a couple of different things that really affect it that you might not think of, and then it has a couple of players that always have to step up in big-time moments that maybe you're not circling as you head into this one. So those are the guys that I'm watching. Those are the things that I'm watching very, very closely. All of these teams need counter punches. All of these teams need that one guy to kind of come out of the woodwork and make that one big-time play, and we'll see if those guys can do that. But let's take our first break here, and we'll move on, and we'll talk about, is this the best shot for Ohio State and Notre Dame? Before we get into our pick, is this the best shot? Is the urgency fully on this game? And will 2025, 2026, 2027 make you look back on this one and say, man, we really should have taken advantage of that moment? But we'll get into that right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the inflection points as well as the unsung heroes that possibly could pop up in this national title game. There's always a couple of things. There's always a couple of plays that are made by guys that you might not know going into the game, and you're definitely going to know after that Monday game. But a lot of different things to kind of pull from this, and we'll see what happens with those things. But now I want to talk about something a little bit different. Apologies with the lower third. I had a little bit of a mistake here. But at the end of the day, I did want to talk about, is this the best shot that Ohio Ohio State and Notre Dame will have for a while. It's really hard to kind of get an idea of just how long that will take or just how long people will have between national title appearances. Notre Dame has been since 2012. Ohio State obviously was in it in 2020 against Alabama, was obviously won it in 2014. So Ohio State's been here pretty consistently. So it's hard to say, they're going to go on a decade hiatus or anything like that, but it is a good it's a good question at the very least, and it's definitely a lot of things that could make me believe that maybe these teams won't be in this spot for a while. I'll put it at a while for now because I don't want to put an exact year on this one, but definitely a couple of things that are working against them at least going forward. And we'll start with Ohio State here, and the biggest one is there's no running it back. There's no getting Jack Sawyer, getting JTT, getting Travion Henderson and Mekik Buka, all of those guys, they're out the door, plain and simple. Donovan Jackson's out the door, as is a lot of players are out the door after this year. So you had everyone come back. You had everyone make the decision that they didn't want to go to the NFL, that they wanted to come back and win a national title. You don't win a national title, then you're looking down to 2025 and you're saying, I don't have all those guys. I don't have the anchors of my team anymore, which are Jack Sawyer, Travion Henderson, and Mekik Buka, and so many more guys. Cody Simon is absolutely huge for this team. So overall, obviously Ohio State is going to have Jeremiah Smith, who I think is the best player in the country going into 2025. Caleb Downs, who I could very easily make the argument is the second best player in the country going into 2025. Kenyatta Jackson, and so many more guys that are going to make plays. Talent will not be an issue, but the veteran talent on this team, the veteran leadership on this team was downright special, and it was a huge, huge reason why they were able to get past the Oregon loss, why they were able to get past the Michigan loss, and now you look at this offseason, you're saying, I know all those guys are walking out the door. If we win that game on Monday, it's all worth it. If we win that game on Monday, then everything is okay. You've slid your chips entirely to the center of the table at the beginning of this season. Now it's time to go finish the goal. Obviously, you missed out on the first two goals you set, which were beating Michigan and winning the Big Ten, but you have the moment to get that big-time golden opportunity, and you definitely don't want to miss it, because then you'll look back on this team and say, how did we let that team slip through our fingers? Then we got to talk about quarterback, and I want to make this very, very clear. I think Julian Sain is going to be the quarterback for Ohio State next year, and I think he is going to be a good player. I feel very confident in this kid. The arm talent is very, very clear. He's much that point guard of the offense that a Bryce Young type player was, and he is a guy that I think is going to be very good. The difference is he is a first-time starter. It's the same conversation that we had about Nico Iamaleava going into this season was he is very, very talented, and he can do all of the things in the world, and frankly, I think he's going to be remarkably successful at Tennessee. He's also doing all of these things for the very first time. Julian Sain, especially, is doing these things for the very first time because he's going to have to step up to be a massive leader on this team next year. Without all of those guys that are walking out the door, Devin Brown is transferring out, Will Howard obviously going to the NFL, he's going to have to be the guy. Everyone's going to be looking to him at every single practice, and it is not an easy thing to step up into. Now, I think the talent level is ridiculous, and frankly, I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country in time, but it's a hard position to get right. You never really know what a quarterback looks like until he gets out there on that field, so it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. It's worked out really well with Will Howard, although midway through the season, I think you would have said it's not working out really well with Will Howard. So the quarterback position is very, very fickle. It's very hard to get set in order, and Ohio State just doesn't have it fully set right now. Love what Julian Sain brings, but it's still a big-time question mark for this team. Then you got Big Ten rivals are elevating. They are getting better day by day, and this is probably the biggest one of the bunch, if I'm being totally honest. I think the talent level is going to be fine at Ohio State. I think Julian Sain will develop into a very good quarterback. These teams aren't going anywhere. Penn State is more up in the air, I think, when you look at the future of Penn State, because if they fall on their face in 2025, then conversations will be had, and that's actually a conversation we'll have tomorrow. But overall, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, they're all getting better. They're all playing better football, and then you look at a team like Indiana or a team like Nebraska, they're getting to a point where maybe they're not going to compete for a national title. I don't think they're going to get to the CFP. Indiana obviously can and has, but at the end of the day, I don't think you have this big-time gap between you and everyone else now. I think you had it for a very long time. Michigan obviously closed that, but then a couple other teams started closing that as well. So you're in a spot where you're going to have a little bit more leeway to take a couple more losses and still make it into the dance. There's no doubt about that. So you could lose to Penn State. You could lose to Michigan. You could lose to Oregon and still find your way in. But at the end of the day, there are going to be very consistent teams over there in the Big Ten for the next 10 to 5 years. Who's to say that Ohio State's going to get through them every year? And on top of that, who's to say they're going to get through a 12-team or 14-team or 16-team playoff after that? So a lot of different questions, but those guys around them getting a lot better is definitely going to play a big-time part in how Ohio State goes about their business the next little bit, and if they're going to be able to lift a trophy in the next little bit. Then we'll move over to Notre Dame, and I just feel like a philosophy change is coming a little bit with Notre Dame. I don't want to say that they're not going to be a power run team or they're not going to be a team that predicates a lot of things off the run, but you look at the quarterbacks that they have coming in, whether it's Steve Angeli or it's CJ Carr, their ability is passing the ball. That is what they do the best. Now, CJ Carr is a little bit more athletic, has that ability to scoot a little bit, but the downfield passing game, I have to assume is going to be employed a little bit more. Mike Denbrock loves to unlock that when he's the OC. He definitely did at LSU with Jaden Daniels. It's something that he'd love to do at Notre Dame. Now, the other side of that is you don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? If you don't, if you're doing what you want to be doing, if you're scoring points, if you're handling games, if you're controlling games, then you're going to be in a good spot. That being said, if you are a team that can, stretch the field, if you're a Notre Dame team, especially with Marcus Freeman as your head coach, your defense is going to play good football. If you can make a couple of plays downfield per game, you're going to be a nearly impossible team to beat, plain and simple. So not to say that the philosophy change is wrong. I fully believe that this is the better thing for Notre Dame in the long term. I believe this is going to put them in a much better place when it comes to playmaking down the field, and I think it's going to put them in a better place to win more national championships down the road. But it is something to think about. It is something that will take some time, and whether it's CJ Carr or Steve Angeli, I think it will be a different attack, and it might just take a little bit of time for that offense to get fully in sync, and you might see a little bit of a interesting offense at the very least from Notre Dame next year, and then we'll see how that develops over time with Mike Denbrock as the OC. The anchors of your defense are gone is a huge, huge reason that Notre Dame is staring down a uncertain future at the very least. Now, they're going to have talent. They are not going to suffer on talent in that Notre Dame defense. They have really, really good young guys like Gabriel Rubio on the front end, Jordan Clark on the back end, obviously Christian Gray and Leonard Moore was the guy I was looking for. They have plenty of talent. I'm not necessarily worried about the talent level, but I think we kind of misjudge, I don't want to say underestimate, but sort of misjudge the amount of effect that Xavier Watts has on that field, the amount of effect that Jack Kaiser has on that field, that Howard Cross has on that field. They are the true communicators of this football team, and whenever you make that transition, whenever you move from Xavier Watts to a possible Jordan Clark, or when you move to a Jack Kaiser to a Jaden Osbury, or whatever the future holds at those two positions, it's going to be a little bit different. The communication's going to be a little bit different, and it might just be a little bit worse. It might just be a little bit slower, a little bit, less precise, and that little thing, it won't necessarily kill them, it won't necessarily bury them, but it could very well impact them in those big-time games that they've been able to do so well at keeping everyone in order. Maybe that gets a little bit away from them, at least for next year, and then maybe beyond, depending on how next year goes. And then the tougher scheduling is coming. And everyone that was mad about Notre Dame not scheduling anyone, it is coming, I promise. Notre Dame has done a really good job of scheduling big-time teams coming down the stretch. In 2025, they will play A&M and Miami. A&M, Miami, and Boise State in 2025. In 2026, take a little bit of a hiatus, play Wisconsin and Miami. 2027, they will, or Wisconsin, Miami, and SMU. Just a little add to that 2026. 2027 will be Clemson. That's one that's set. There will be others, obviously. USC is included in all of these, of course. And then you have 2028. It's Texas, Clemson, Miami. They are playing big-time teams coming down the stretch. Syracuse is on pretty much every one of those lists, which seems like a program heading in the right direction. Arkansas is on there a couple of times. That might not be one that worries you every single year, but absolutely is one that could worry you in a couple of different years and be a thorn in your side at different moments. So overall, I do think Notre Dame will have a little bit more leeway when they play a Texas, Clemson, Miami type schedule, but I do think 10-2 going into that conference championship week where you're sitting on your couch, is going to look a whole lot different than 11-1. I would make the argument that if they were 10-2, even with a little bit of a tougher schedule in this year going into that weekend, I think they would have been left out, if I'm being totally honest. I think they would have made the argument for Alabama being in a conference, being in a tougher conference, and they would have put them in. So that is something to think about. It might be that you have a little bit more leeway, but I'm not necessarily sure that you have the leeway that you absolutely need to handle this scheduling. So it's going to get tougher for Notre Dame. Everyone that hated Notre Dame scheduling nobody, I promise you that is changing very, very soon, and that could play a part in their ability to find their way back to a national title anytime soon. But my final take on this, because it's up in the air. I think there's a million different variables to win a national title. So that's the biggest thing, is national titles are hard to come by. So it's not crazy to think that regardless of what these teams do over the next 10 years, that they might not find their way back to this pinnacle. But the reality is, Ohio State will have Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, and so many more guys going forward. Notre Dame will have Leonard Moore, Jaden Greathouse, Jeremiah Love. They will have players. They will be fine. I love the two head coaches here, especially Marcus Freeman. These are special moments, though. There's no doubt about that. These are moments that you never know if you're going to get another shot to come back here, especially over the next little bit, especially in these two guys' careers. Jeremiah Smith wants a national title. Jeremiah Love really wants a national title, and they won't have too many more opportunities to get it after this one. So it is a huge moment on Monday. It could be a moment that totally defines what this team is about, and it could be a moment that lives on for quite some time, because you might not have a great shot at one coming up. Now, I do think both these teams will be in the mix, but let's be honest, it's very, very hard to get to the point they did, and these veteran quarterbacks are a huge piece of why they did, and they're out the door. So a lot of different pieces to think about there. Obviously, Ohio State and Notre Dame will be fine. They're not going to go into poverty after this, but definitely something to think about, that Monday might be the last shot they have in a while to lift that trophy to be on the very top of the sport. But we'll talk about that in more detail after everything unfolds, obviously, but it is officially time. We'll get into my national championship pick and preview right after this break, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a couple of different things, and the biggest thing is this the last shot that Ohio State and Notre Dame will have at a national title for quite some time? Now, both these teams are going to be set up for success in the future. It's not to say that I'm burying those programs, but it is something to watch. It's very, very hard to find your way to a national title, and it could be quite some time until they find their way back. But we'll talk about that obviously in more detail after the national title, but it is officially time. We got to pick this national title. We got to get into what exactly I think, where I'm going, and I've gone back and forth just a little bit. The 12-team playoff is officially coming to an end, and it's had some twists and turns. People were very mad after that first round. People were very mad after the second round. People are going to be very mad. Let's just be totally honest with each other. And people are going to be mad regardless of what the result is here, regardless of how it unfolds. But at the end of the day, we've done the storylines. We've done the matchups. We've done unsung heroes. We've done the stakes. Now we just got to get into the game. We got to get into what is going to happen on that gridiron. And one of the things that is kind of made this hard to get a beat on. I feel relatively confident in the pick that I have made, but there was a thing that kept getting in my way, that kept making me question all the things that I was thinking going into this one, and it was the Notre Dame-Penn State game. You look at Notre Dame throughout this entire season, the big-time question was that with them was a team that could not play from behind, a team that had no ability to get big-time passing plays, and a team that always, always, always wins the turnover battle, and that's a huge part of why they win. None of those things happened against Penn State. They found a big-time pass play to Jaden Greathouse that was the difference maker in that game. You had a team that was playing from behind, was down 10-0 early in that one, and then they lost the turnover battle 2-1. They did make the huge pick, no doubt about it, but they did lose that turnover battle in that game. So you look around and you're wondering what this team is. Are they totally different than what we thought they were? Are they going to be able to find some openings against this back end of this defense and maybe make some of the big-time plays they made against Penn State? But this is a team that just wins games without looking great and at times being outplayed in different respects. I can make a pretty good argument that Penn State outplayed them for a large part of that game. Notre Dame made the winning plays, and there's really no other way to put it. So really remarkable stuff, and it puts you in a weird spot going forward. But the question that I have is, how many chances will they really get? How many chances will they get to take a lead in this game, to take over this game, and how many turnovers will they get from this guy right here? Will Howard's been really good about keeping the ball in his hands, about making sure you don't put it into weird spots, and about making sure that you keep the ball as safe as you possibly can. That being said, this is going to be a unique challenge. The man coverage thing is a thing that a lot of people think Ohio State's going to absolutely eat up, and I fully agree that there are certain times that it will look like they are just dominating that man coverage. I feel fairly confident about that, but that being said, they are very, very good in man coverage as Notre Dame, and that means that Will Howard at some point is going to have to push the ball into tight windows. He's going to have to make throws that maybe he's not all that comfortable making. Now, he's made a couple of them. The Emeka Egbuka throws in the Tennessee and Oregon game were downright incredible, and he's been a guy that has the ability to make those throws. How consistently can he make them? And Notre Dame is 5th in the country in takeaways, so he's going to have to throw in the teeth of a defense that has some of the best ball hawks in the country. They are going to come after you. They are going to make some big-time plays, and the question is, how safe can you keep that ball while still wanting to push it down the field into that man coverage and possibly into some combo coverages with man underneath and zone over top? Very, very tough thing to do, but he's got to take care of it. There's no doubt about that. But the glaring matchup that I think everyone is watching going into this one with some of the injuries coming in for Notre Dame is that defensive line for Ohio State against Notre Dame's offensive line and how they can get to Riley Leonard and what's the counterpunch for that. Because the reality is, he's going to get pressured. It's a thing that happens no matter who you're playing, no matter who is next to, or who is in front of, who's in front of Ohio State. You are going to be able, you're going to get pressured. Kind of lost my train of thought there. But at the end of the day, they are going to get to you. A couple of times, Jack Sawyer, JTT, all of these guys are going to make plays. You have to find a way out. So Riley Leonard's legs are a huge, huge counterpunch to that. Definitely something that you're going to need in this game. His ability to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. His ability to avoid guys like Cody Simon and Caleb Downs once he does get out of the pocket are going to be absolutely massive. But when you look at this, one thing that is working in Notre Dame's favor, and it's something that I wish wasn't working in their favor just by virtue of it's the wrong way for this to go about business, but Ohio State is 134th in the country when it comes to opponents' penalties. There's 134 teams in the country. They get held a lot. And if you're watching that Texas game, they got held plenty in that game as well. Now, Texas did as well, so I'm not necessarily saying it was aggressively in one direction, but it's been shown. It's been shown that Charles Jagusa, Tosh Baker, Emil Wagner, these tackles might be able to get away with some stuff. So I'm not saying you should, just totally grab onto them and hold for dear life, but I am saying be a little bit more handsy in this one. I definitely do think you have a little bit more ability to be a little bit more handsy, give Riley Leonard a little bit more time in that pocket, and then if it does break down, Riley Leonard's got to be the counter with his legs. He's got to be huge in that respect, and if he can't, it's going to be really, really hard for that to unfold. But a lot of different things going into this game. The quarterbacks are obviously a huge talking point, as is the battle in the trenches. But the big-time thing you're going to want to watch is just how many times can Jeremiah Smith get the ball. He is going to get man coverage a couple of times in this game. Now, he will be a little bit different. Texas dealt him a little bit different. I have to assume that Notre Dame will deal with him a little bit differently. But whatever it is, man, zone, combo, whatever, they got to find matchups that they like. They got to find a way to get number 4 the football, because in that Texas game, they won the game by 14 points. It's not to take anything away from what Ohio State did or what that offense did throughout that game. But he had 1 catch and 3 yards. They had 21 points offensively, and they got 7 of those points on a play that I just don't think is going to happen in this game. So he is a guy you have to get the ball. He is a guy that Notre Dame is going to know that you have to get the ball. So you got to find matchups, whether it's with motion or with a couple of different switch releases, whatever that looks like. You got to find a way to get a couple of openings in. If Notre Dame can cover them really closely, maybe you throw it up anyway and see if number 4 can make a big-time play. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a contentious battle, but you got to get number 4 the football. You can win this game without him technically, but it's going to be a whole lot easier to win it with him. So I think that's going to be a huge matchup, those DBs against that guy in particular, but all of the Ohio State wide receivers, obviously, just trying to find matchups they like and see if they can take advantage of them. But overall, this is going to be a fun one, guys. This is about as good as it gets because you look at these two teams, two of the best defenses in the country. I think you could say 1-3, 1-2. Any way you want to cut it. These are two of the best defenses in the country. Both these teams might not necessarily have the quarterback that's going to wow you off the page with the athletic ability, but they are the mental they are the mental leader of this team. They are the emotional leader of this team, and they have done an incredible job throughout this season. But one of the things that we have to know going into this one is someone's going to become the third coach in the country to have a national title to their name. They'll join Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. Whether it's Ryan Day or Marcus Freeman, one of these programs that's been the history of college football in a lot of different ways will sit back on top of the sport, and Ryan Day will have a chance to clear his name. Freeman has a chance to take over the sport, two battle-tested, mentally tough teams in attack mode. It's going to be awesome. Cannot wait for this game. But let's get into some players to watch, and then we'll get into some keys to the game. But players to watch, Jaden Greathouse is huge in this game and really going forward in the next couple of years for Notre Dame. But we'll focus on Monday for the time being. He's got to make a play. Notre Dame is not going to be able to just pound the rock 40 times in this game and come away with a win. They have to find a way to get that one explosive play. You see that he had Jalen Reed on the ground right there. He's going to have to find a way to get some of these other guys on the ground. It's very hard to beat Caleb Downs. It's very hard to beat Lathan Ransom, but he's got to make plays. And he is the most physically imposing guy on this offense when you talk about wide receivers. He's going to be a guy that has to make a couple of big-time plays, and Riley Leonard does have to get him the ball in the right moments. But he's the most physically gifted wide receiver they have, in my opinion, and he's absolutely a guy that needs to make plays in this game. Leonard Moore is the other guy because you are going to get number 4 in this game. You are going to get Jeremiah Smith a whole darn lot, and when you're not getting him, you're getting Emeka Egbuka. So you got to be ready. He's got to play the best football of his entire life. He's got to play pretty much far and away the best football of his entire life. Very talented player. I expect him to be an All-American in a couple of years. But at the end of the day, this is a challenge unlike anything that he has ever faced, and he's got to be up to the challenge in this one. Emeka Egbuka. This is the last time he's going to be putting on a Ohio State uniform, and this is a guy. This is a guy that Ohio State fans will remember for a very long time. He is the leading receiving yards leader in Ohio State history for a career. He is a guy that has made play after play throughout this tournament, but even in the past has made a number of big-time plays in Ohio State history, and he has a chance to be on the top of the mountaintop. Very talented player, and if they're going to give man coverage and then maybe a safety over top to Jeremiah Smith, that means you're getting outright man coverage. So take advantage of it. One of the best man beaters in the entire country, and I expect him to be very happy with the matchups that he gets on Monday. Sonny Styles, I highlighted them going into the Texas game, and I got to highlight him again because the reality is Jaden Blue beat him on a touchdown, and that is a huge part of this game. Ainias Williams is a very underrated part of this offense for Notre Dame because the ability for him to get out of the backfield, make a couple of big-time plays on third down in the pass game is massive. And Sonny Styles is going to be the guy that is going to have to chase him around in a lot of different respects. So you can't get beat like you did against Texas. You can't get beat on a wheel route because that is a route that Riley Leonard can very well throw, and Ainias Williams, Jeremiah Love, whoever is going to be able to make that play. So Sonny Styles is going to have to be huge in coverage in this game because Notre Dame's going to throw everything at you. Those interior linebackers are going to be massive and kind of handling all of the different things they're going to throw. But let's get into some keys to the game. We'll start with Notre Dame, and Riley Leonard has to extend plays in this one. They are going to get pressure. I can almost promise you that. The Ohio State front has 16 sacks in the first 3 games of the CFP. Notre Dame's injured O-line does not necessarily help that a little bit. So Notre Dame is going to be in a spot where Riley Leonard just has to escape for positive yards. It doesn't have to be every single play. Hopefully it won't be every single play, but at the end of the day, he is going to have to make those 1 or 2 plays on a 3rd and 10 where he scoots out of big-time pressure, he makes a run for first down and keeps a drive alive. Those are huge, huge plays. He made them against Georgia, he made them against Penn State, and he's got to make them in this game. And then elite wide receiver blocking, I think, is a huge part of this game because you talk about how good Jack Sawyer, how good JTT are. You want to get away from those guys. And now you're going to have to deal with Caleb Downs. So it's not like you're getting the great end of the deal, but at the end of the day, at the very least, you have more time to operate. You have more space to operate in those respects. So you're going to have the wide receivers on the outside really stick these guys. They are so good at getting off block. Davison Igbenogson, Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock, all of these guys on the outside are so good at getting off blocks. You got to make sure that you stick them. You got to make sure that they can turn the corner, and then maybe you can get some of those explosive plays against this ridiculous back end, because you saw against Texas, there were plays in that screen game where it looked like Ryan Wingo was taking it to the house because of that wide receiver blocking, and then there were others on that pitch play. It wasn't going to the house because wide receiver and outside blocking. So it's going to be a huge, huge thing for this game. If you can keep Caleb Downs at bay with that blocking ability, you're going to be in a really good shape. And then bend, don't break. This Ohio State team is going to make plays. They are too talented. They have too many guys. They're operating at too high of a level for them not to make big-time plays. But keeping it in the 20s is a winning formula. So threes, that's all you have to do. Force threes instead of sevens. Make sure that when they get in that 20-yard line, they have to deal with a lot of tight windows. You come after Will Howard, you make him a little bit flustered, and you make sure that they're kicking field goals at the end of drives. If you can do that, then you might just get a miss here and there from Jaden Fielding, but also you'll very much keep in this game for a little bit longer than maybe you would if Ohio State was able to finish off a couple of those drives. So bend, don't break defense is going to be huge for Notre Dame. It's been great all year. It's got to be absolutely incredible in this game. And then moving forward to Ohio State, tight window throws is going to be the name of the game for Will Howard in this one. Now, there will be open receivers. There will be times where he's throwing to a guy that is pretty wide open because these are very good man beaters on Ohio State, no doubt about that. But there will be tighter windows. Xavier Watts is so good as a center fielder, just kind of closing up different spaces, making it really hard for quarterbacks to throw into really open windows. Also, Jordan Clark and Leonard Moore and Christian Gray have done such a good job in man coverage that it's hard for me to believe that Ohio State's going to be able to get separation every single play. So there will be tight window throws that just have to be made in this game. Will Howard's just going to have to make them. He's made a number of them in the first 3 games, but at the end of the day, he's going to have to make a lot of them in this game, and if he doesn't, then you could see a couple of picks going the other direction. Then you got to win the first quarter. While Notre Dame did come back by 10 against Penn State after going down in the first quarter, I think Ohio State just has too much firepower for Penn State or for Notre Dame to be able to pull that off. If Ohio State has first quarter success like they've been having in the CFP, it's going to be really hard for Notre Dame to find a way to come back in this one, especially if they're up 14-0 at the end of the first. It's going to be a nightmare for Notre Dame to find their way back in this. And then eliminate the big play is huge. Notre Dame is going to have a big one in this game. They're going to have a 98-yard Jeremiah Love run. They're going to have a 53-yard Jaden Greathouse catch. They're going to have a play that totally changes the complexion and the momentum of this game. If they can't get that, then it's going to be really hard for this offense to operate. If you can pin your ears back and have tons of guys in the box and make sure that you don't have to worry about those big pass plays, you're going to be in really good shape. So that back end, Caleb Downs, Latham Ransom, all of those guys have to make some game-saving tackles. Caleb Downs made about 3 of them when he played Texas last week. He's going to have to make a couple in this game, no doubt about it. And if they avoid that big play, I just don't see Notre Dame having the firepower to keep up in this one. So going to be an awesome game. 2 teams that are as battle-tested as you could possibly imagine, have dealt with all of the talk around the Michigan game, around the NIU game for Notre Dame. It was insanity around these teams, but they've hit their stride. They found their way to Atlanta, and I think Ohio State finishes the job. I think they officially accomplished the job. I think this title or bust season does not go bust. I do think they win this thing, and I think they win it 30-17. Now, I do think it will be a little bit closer than the score might indicate. I think Ohio State will score a touchdown late in this one. Notre Dame will start to have to force on offense, and Ohio State will be able to get a pick to kind of end this one out. So I don't want to say, Ohio State's going to roll them and totally control this game, but I do think Ohio State just has that little bit. I think Jeremiah Smith will get that separation on those on those man coverage routes, just that little bit that he needs. And I do think Ohio State wins this one. It's going to be an awesome game, and that'll do it for the college football season. So a little bit of a bittersweet moment. We love to see the national championship. We love to see the team celebrated on that level, but at the same time, you obviously hate to see that clock kick zero and realize we got to wait till August 24th. So it's going to take a while, definitely going to be an upsetting time, but we will talk about that in time. Still plenty of time to get excited for this game, still plenty of time in the college football season, at least as far as I'm concerned. So let's go and take our third break here, and when we come back, let's just get into talking points for each of these teams if they win the national title. What would the fallout be for both these teams? Obviously, Ohio State might be a pretty explosive fallout one way or the other, but for Notre Dame, it would be all optimism. It would be very, very interesting to watch that unfold, but we'll get into that right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the national title. I gave my official pick for that national title. I am going to pick Ohio State to finish it off. I found my way all the way back to the team that I picked in the beginning of the year. I definitely wavered on them a number of times throughout this year, but they're the best team playing football right now, and I think they finish it off with the national title, and a lot of people have to delete a lot of tweets about Ryan Day. But let's get into a little bit of the fallout. Apologies again about the lower third. Forgot to center those, but let's get into a little bit of the fallout of this championship, because both these teams have the ability to win, and the aftermath of it would be very, very interesting to watch unfold. We will do the nice side of it. We will do if they win, not if they lose, because I think we all understand what would happen over at Ohio State if they lose. I think we kind of understand what would happen over at Notre Dame if they lose. But at the end of the day, what would happen if they won? You know, what would this look like for both these teams if they find their way to win this national championship and they are standing on top of the sport on Monday night? And I think we'll start with Ohio State. Ryan Day would be a fan favorite for about 9 months. That's the reality of this job, but he would be in a position where you could put him in the same sentence with Jim Tressel, with Urban Meyer, because he is a national title winner. It would obviously be a huge breaking point in his career. It would be a moment where a lot of people would be very mad about the narratives that they tried to push around him, but at the end of the day, a lot of people in general just kind of turn their nose up at the idea of Ryan Day being able to, or being an elite coach in this sport, because Michigan is a problem. There's no doubt about that. That has been a big time issue. That is a huge, huge part of the Ohio State job, but the guy's incredible. He has one of the best, I think the best, winning percentage in head coaches since a long time. I can't exactly remember, but he's absolutely a guy that can win a lot of football games. He's going to turn that corner on Monday. If he wins this national title, that will be the corner turned, and then you're leading him into 2025, and you got to run into Michigan again. That's the reality of this job. Is at some point on Monday night, if Ohio State fan is watching this, they're going to say, let's go, that's so awesome, love that for Jack Sawyer, love that for the team, love that for Ryan Day, but you better beat Michigan next year. That's going to be the reality of this job. That is the reality that Ryan Day knows that this job is about. So he will be a fan favorite. The fans will love him for a time, and then they will get to that Michigan game. They'll start thinking about it again and say, if he doesn't win that one, we're going to be right back mad at them. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, but at the very least, Ryan Day will have some time to breathe after this season if he is able to win on Monday. And then there's kind of just a thought that I had. Is this the most memorable season Ohio State's had ever? I'm thinking about, a lot of the different things that they've done in their career, in their history, and won multiple national championships, have had Heisman winners, have had everything in between you could possibly have. But this has been one of the weirdest years of the entire college football history in general, but especially in Ohio State, because you have a 12-team playoff. You think you are an absolute shoo-in. There is absolutely no question that you are getting into that thing. Then you lose to Oregon. You're thinking, okay, we're still probably in pretty good shape. We're still very much in this thing, and probably shouldn't have to worry too much. You beat Penn State. You kind of stabilize yourself a little bit. and then you lose to Michigan, and everything comes crashing to the ground. You're still in the CFP, so you still have a shot for that big-time goal, but you missed out on the Big Ten title. You lost to that team for the 4th year in a row. You had the quarterback. You had the $12 million roster. You had everyone coming back, and you fell on your face a little bit. In late November, that's how it felt. It felt like Ohio State missed the mark to win a national title. They missed the mark to do the thing that they had set out to do in that year, which was championship or bust. They said it very plainly throughout the spring and throughout the fall camp, and we took their word for it. So there was a moment where it just didn't look like it was happening. It looked like they were on the outside looking in. It looked like Ryan Day could get fired, and then Ohio State could be kind of up in flames going into 2025, trying to figure out what players they have, what coach they want to take over, a million different questions around this team. And then they just became a buzzsaw. They tore through Tennessee. They tore through Oregon. They played a great game against Texas where they made the winning plays, and it's got to be the most confusing thing for Ohio State fans. They've got to have gone through the weirdest range of emotions that you could possibly imagine, but you have a chance to finish it off the right way. So it's a complicated team, no doubt about that, and the legacy of them will be complicated with those Michigan losses, but this final, incredible run. But it's a really weird season. It's one of those seasons where if you thought you had a beat on Ohio State at any moment, they officially made you look stupid the next week. So it's a very confusing team, but they have the chance to finish the job, and that's the other part of this. The job would be accomplished. Now, there's some Ohio State fans that would push back on me on that, because the reality is it wouldn't be the best Ohio State team, or Ohio. That's definitely an interesting question we can explore next week. But it wouldn't be the best Ohio State season that they have ever had, because the reality is they didn't beat Michigan. They didn't win the Big Ten, and possibly they could win the national title, but to have a really, truly successful season, or an all-time season, probably a better way to put it, you got to do all three. That's the plain and simple truth of that job, and now you're in a position where maybe they won't agree with me. Maybe they won't agree that the job is entirely done, but it was a title or bust season, and they won a title, and that was obviously the ultimate goal. It won't be perfect. It'll be a little bit frustrating. It'll be a little bit weird to look back on that Michigan game and just say, how did that happen? How did we let that team beat us? But let's be honest. You beat Michigan, and then you beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship, then you're in a weird spot going into the CFP, and then maybe you're not in the best spot that you possibly could be. So it's a very, very weird season. You could very much argue that Michigan loss is a big-time reason that they are here in the first place. So weird season for Ohio State. It is going to be a very, very hard season for fans to kind of get a beat on and figure out how they feel. But the reality is, if they're national champions, none of that matters. Let's be totally honest. They're going to love this season, but it is going to be a very confusing season at the very least. Moving forward to Notre Dame, it would be a true return to the top. You talk about Notre Dame, they have always been towards the top of this sport. They've always been in the mix for this sport. 2012, they went to the national title and got rolled by Nick Saban in Alabama 42-14. They went to the CFP in 2018 and 2020. They lost by 27 to Clemson. They lost by 17 to Alabama. They got dominated in the postseason, and that was always the story around Notre Dame. Regardless of if it was Brian Kelly or even Marcus Freeman early on in his tenure, it was just they can't do the big thing. They can't beat those big-time teams down there in the SEC, in the Big Ten, and even a Clemson team that had elevated to the top of the sport. They don't have the ability to beat those top-level teams. And then they found their way back. They found their way back to beat a lot of these big-time teams, Penn State, Georgia, and now you're in a position where you beat Ohio State. A lot of things change very quickly. A lot of the talk around what Notre Dame is under Marcus Freeman, a lot of the talk around what Notre Dame is as a program totally changes, and you finally get back fully on the mountaintop, not just close to the mountaintop and then get kicked in the face and fall back down the hill. Now you have a chance to really stand on the mountaintop, and it would be a very, very interesting thing to watch, no doubt about that. And then you might just be looking at a dynasty coming forward. So, could this be the start of the Marcus Freeman dynasty? And there's a lot to kind of unpack here, because it's very hard to win a national title. I've said it probably a million times on here. I don't think anyone's going on a Nick Saban, Bama type run really ever again, if I'm being totally honest. I think NIL, the transfer portal, the world of college football makes that incredibly hard to do. That being said, the recruiting is getting better around Notre Dame. The money stream that they are bringing in from the CFP is downright incredible. They're going to bring in about $40 million from this. For comparison, Ohio State has to bring in only $5 because they got to split it with everyone else in the Big Ten. So just to give you an idea of how much money stream is coming in comparative to the other teams in there. And then you will have a trophy in that case that doesn't have dust on it. That is a huge, huge recruiting pitch, and the reality is, I'm not saying that Marcus Freeman is going to be at Notre Dame for 20 years and totally tear apart the sport, win 15 championships, or anything crazy. What I am saying is, Marcus Freeman in this Notre Dame program, as well as just about any other program in the country, is really set up for success in the NIL era, and doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon. CFB, a philosophy change, is the other thing I want to talk about here, and this is one that will be up for debate. There's a lot of teams that do what they do, and they're not really going to change that. But when you look back at especially the last two, but you could even go back to the UGA teams and kind of apply this to a certain extent as well. They were grind and pound teams. They were run-first teams. They were teams that we're going to run the ball, and then we'll find that one opening on the back end that we need. That's just kind of the way they've gone about business, especially Michigan and Notre Dame the last couple of years. A huge reason that Texas is not in the national championship is because of run blocking, is because of the ability to have that power run game that these two teams do incredibly, incredibly well. So you're in a position where maybe some other teams will be looking at other places. Maybe some other teams will be saying, maybe we do want to lean more into this ground and pound offense. Maybe we do want to lean into getting more big bodies on the interior and just saying, we're just going to make you quit. That's the reality of the way that we're going to play football going forward, and it's not necessarily a bad way to go about business, obviously. If Notre Dame wins the national title right after Michigan did, doing the same exact thing, it would be very, very interesting to watch what people will do. Now, I'm not saying Texas is going to totally flip past and beat Notre Dame in a couple of years, but I do think there will be more of an emphasis on the power run game, and then picking your moments in the pass game will be more prioritized. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. It's definitely something that a lot of these coaches are going to do what they're going to do. They're not necessarily going to change too much, but I do think the emphasis on that power run game will be that much more important going forward, and especially when you see if Notre Dame were to lift a national title, it's hard to say that that's not the way to get there. So definitely something to watch there. A lot of different fallouts from that thing, and Marcus Freeman could get the guy that has Ohio State fans fully on his back, or fully behind him for about 9 months until the next season starts, and then Marcus Freeman could downright take over the sport if he was able to win on Monday. So definitely a lot of things to talk about, and we'll get into that after the championship, obviously. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, let's do a little bit of a Hot Take Thursday. We'll get into a couple of National Title Edition hot takes, and one I think would just make this game just that little bit of spice that I need in there. But we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about kind of what the fallout would be if Ohio State won the championship, if Notre Dame won the championship. What would be the talk coming out of that thing? And obviously we'll get into that in time. We'll talk about what the actual fallout is once we get after that game. But let's jump into our final segment here and a little bit of a Hot Take Thursday for you guys. A little bit of a national title edition of this, and I have a couple of ones on here that I don't know if people are going to love, but at the end of the day, I do want to jump in. And the first one is just to add a little bit of spice to this thing. There will be a defensive or special teams touchdown in this game, and I just want to see one. I'll be totally honest with you. It might just be more manifestation than anything else. But we have seen these teams make their fair share of plays on defense and special teams throughout this year and throughout this tournament especially. You did have the Jaden Harrison take one back for a kick return against Georgia. You obviously had Jack Sawyer make that play against Texas. So these teams are not necessarily incapable of doing this. They are more than capable of doing it, especially Notre Dame. So these defenses have the ability, no doubt about that, and they have the playmakers to make it at every single place. And then you look at the quarterbacks in this matchup. Both very, very talented guys, but both have been known to not necessarily be the most prolific passers in the world. Now, Will Howard's gotten a lot better in that category, is also a little bit more turnover prone. So you're putting yourself in a position where you're playing just ridiculously good secondaries and DBs on the other side, and you have quarterbacks that might be a little bit shaky, might be a little bit off target at different moments throughout this game. And then you look at the return game. You have Jaden Harrison back there for Notre Dame, going to make a number of plays. Hurlman is the one that returns punts, and then you got Caleb Downs and Meke Egbuka returning kicks and punt returns for Ohio State. This could be a return. There's no doubt about that. So this year has been off the walls weird. It's been all about different upsets and craziness and everyone bouncing all over the place and no one knowing who's good and everything in between. It would only make sense for this game to be just that little bit weird and have that one couple of trick plays, maybe a defensive or special teams touchdown, just something a little bit weird in this one. Just feels like the right way to finish off this season. Then you got both quarterbacks, and they are the prime examples of what you want from a transfer quarterback. And it's not to say that, other guys that have gone other places aren't, what you want. Cam Ward, you absolutely want a Cam Ward. Shadur Sanders, you very badly want a Shadur Sanders. But these two guys have been hugely important to what these teams have done this year, and it's plainly the truth in my opinion. Will Howard, Riley Leonard, not necessarily the most physically imposing guys in the world. Now, plenty athletic. I'm not necessarily taking anything away from those guys, but when you talk about them, you're not talking about the arm strength or the arm talent. You're mainly talking about how smart they are, how they take care of the football, how they're a little bit mobile, how they play around with some different things, and how more than anything they are downright leaders of these football teams. And it cannot be overstated how important that was for these teams. They had the loss to Oregon that was on Will Howard's shoulders, and he has taken a huge step forward since that, both on the field and off the field. Riley Leonard has been kind of stabilizing force. After that NIU loss, they could have lost themselves very quickly. And then Riley Leonard and a lot of the other leaders on this team stepped up, said, we're going to find a way to bounce back from this, and they've been able to do it. So these quarterbacks, and a lot of the quarterbacks we've seen over the past couple of titles, aren't necessarily the most miraculous physical specimens you've ever seen in the world, but they're going to make the right plays. They're going to execute at a really, really high level. They're going to lead their teammates in the right way, and everyone's going to play that little bit harder because of that guy. So portal quarterbacks are really, really hard to get right. They're really, really hard to find a way to make sure that they fit in your offense, that they fit your locker room. But the biggest part is, do they fit your locker room? And both these guys very much do. That is shown throughout the season, and definitely in the last couple of games, it's really shown with these. The winning coach in this one is the second best coach in the country. I feel pretty good about this one. I'll be totally honest with you, especially when we're talking about Ryan Day. Marcus Freeman we can have a little bit more of a conversation about, but Ryan Day is one of the best head coaches in the country. If you rank him anywhere below number 5, I have a question, because I don't know how you could. But at the end of the day, he is a guy that if he gets to that spot on Monday, if he wins that national title, it will be a massive jump in his spot in the overall coaching world, and the gap between him and Kirby Smart would not be as big as some people will make you believe. But at the end of the day, very, very talented head coach, and he would be in a position where he would be pretty firmly the second best head coach in the country as far as I'm concerned. For Marcus Freeman, I think it's fair to say it would be a little bit tougher to sell, because you do kind of want that little bit longer of a time, a little bit longer of a tenure where he's had a lot of success, like a Ryan Day or like a, Kirby Smart or a Dabo Swinney, someone like that. But at the end of the day, the job that he has done with his team is really incredible. Obviously, Brian Kelly left a ton for him and left plenty of talent, but he has elevated that talent. He has made that talent from very good to downright elite, and being able to compete with teams like Ohio State, like Georgia, like Penn State, where a couple of years ago, they just wouldn't have been able to. So he has elevated this team in a huge, huge way, and I would not oppose if you were one to say he's the second best head coach in the country if you were to win on Monday. And then you do have these two guys. They're already among the top head coaches in the country. There's There's no doubt about that. Monday's just a moment where they can get really close to that mountaintop. So it's going to be awesome to watch this unfold. I understand plenty of arguments around other coaches being number 2. You could even put Dabo still number 2, and I would have no problem with that. But at the end of the day, these are two head coaches that are elevating at the right time, and that national trophy could be the thing that puts them over the edge and puts them right on the doorstep of the best coach in the country possibly. Ohio State has faced their toughest on-field challenge already, and this is a tough one to kind of get my hands on because I have all the respect in the world for what Notre Dame is and what they've been able to do and how they've been able to battle throughout this year. I just think Texas might have been tougher just from a matchup perspective because Ohio State loves man battles. And while I do think Notre Dame will switch it up just a little bit in this game, play a little bit more zone or play man underneath, maybe a cover 2 man type concept where you play man underneath, you have the 2 safeties over top to kind of bracket when you need to. But at the end of the day, there are so many guys on that Ohio State offense that it's just going to be really hard. I don't think I would trust certain NFL cornerbacks to guard Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith one-on-one, frankly. So there are going to be openings there, no doubt about it. And then Notre Dame, they can make life tough for Ohio State, but if you can't get that run game going, if you can't get Riley Leonard's ability to run the football going like Penn State did in a lot of different ways, will they have the downfield passing game to make plays? Will they be able to find the openings in this back end that is a whole lot better than what Penn State has? So it's going to be a really, really tough matchup. I just think this is a much tougher matchup much easier, matchup for Ohio State than it was against Texas. That being said, I do think the mentality, the ability, and kind of the nature of Notre Dame is we're going to pull together, we're going to make sure that we fight tooth and nail. So it's not to say that I think Ohio State's going to blow them out, or maybe they'll even play a closer game than they played against Texas. But the way that I see it, I think the explosive pass game is really going to hurt Notre Dame in this spot, and I really do think that defense is just going to be too much for that Notre Dame offense. So I think Ohio State's faced their toughest challenge, on-field challenge at the very least thus far, but at the end of the day, might not be the toughest off-field challenge, as weird as that sounds. I think the mentality of Notre Dame might be something that could make this one a little bit closer. And then Notre Dame, if they win this game, it would change college football forever. And it's kind of a hard thing to do, and I might want to do a full segment on this maybe next week sometime. But if Notre Dame wins this game, there will be conversations around some universities about going independent. I can absolutely promise you that, because when we talked about the money earlier, $40 million for the CFP run for Notre Dame, Ohio State closer to $5 million because you got to split it with all of his Big Ten buddies. So that's the reality of this sport. Notre Dame has the ability to say, we're going to keep all of this to ourselves. We're going to be able to re-put it into NIL and recruiting and all of that in the revenue sharing agreement and all of the different things that are coming up. They're going to be able to do that. Now, not every school can do this. In fact, very, very few schools can be independent. That's just a very, very hard thing to do. You have to be in a financial standing that is astronomical. But there are a couple. Let's just be totally honest. There are a couple of teams that would possibly consider this, and one in particular that we can talk about in more detail in that big time segment, but there's something that it wouldn't happen overnight. I don't think it would happen in 2025 or maybe even 2026, but I do think there will be a moment where if Notre Dame wins this one, if they come back and possibly make another run in 2025, there will be some people in Austin, Texas, almost especially Austin, Texas, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Columbus, Ohio, that are saying, why are we sharing this with everyone else? Now, it's not to say that it's going to happen. I really much hope that it doesn't happen, but at the end of the day, if they win this thing, I promise you, there's going to be some boosters around Texas, there's going to be some boosters around Michigan and others that say, we can do this. Why don't we just jump ship and say, we're going to keep it all to ourselves, we're going to get into the playoff, we'll be able to schedule essentially however we want, and we'll move forward from there. Now, I hope that doesn't happen. I wouldn't necessarily fully bet on that happening, but it is conversations that will be had. These aren't the two best teams in the country, and that is more than fine. And this is a tough one because I love what Notre Dame has done. I love what Ohio State has done this year. But to me, these are just not definitively the two best teams in the country. But at the end of the day, I don't think you can say any two teams are definitively the two best teams in the country. So at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a diss on Notre Dame by any means, but I don't know who I would have as the top two teams. I think I could make a very good argument for those two teams right there, Oregon and Ohio State. I could say Ohio State, Texas. I could say Oregon, Texas, which I wouldn't, but at the end of the day, I possibly could. But at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things where you're going to have a year like this. The college football season was absolutely off the walls, and it came down to who can kind of stay even, who can make the plays when they very much need to. Notre Dame did that time and again. So I don't want to take anything away from Notre Dame. I don't want to say Notre Dame is a bad team. If they're not the number 2 team in the country, they're number 3 or 4. So I'm not necessarily saying they are far away from where they should be, but the reality is, I just don't think these are the 2 top teams in the country. I think they're the 2 most deserving teams in the country, which I'm more than fine with them being in the national title. So it's going to be awesome to watch all of this unfold. Wanted to make sure I did a full show where it was just all national title talk. It is the last game of the season. Got to enjoy it as much as we can, and we have a couple more things coming for you tomorrow. We'll talk about the roster building of both these programs and how incredible it's been. We'll talk about Quinn Ewers and that NFL decision tomorrow and how I think he fully made the right decision and how I think his legacy needs to be more respected than it is right now. But we'll get into that tomorrow. Definitely some really interesting things as we get into the weekend, but that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you tomorrow to wrap up the week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of